Welcome back to GhostPixelz, Zero here, and today we're going to talk a little bit about shutter speed. First off, well, you probably heard this sound before. That is the sound that a mirrorless or a camera with mirror, a DSLR, will make whenever it snaps a picture. So it should sound fairly familiar if you're into photography. Now, let's actually look into this a little bit deeper and figure out what's actually going on and how this impacts your picture, shall we? So the picture you're currently seeing on screen is a little bit on the dark side and is a little bit smudgy, as in the car isn't all that crisp. And this is exactly what the issue is. So it's too dark, which means the shutter speed was potentially too high for the rest of the settings. We'll get back to that in just a moment. And since the car is not fully crisp because it's moving, it is not stopped enough, and that's the thing with the shutter speed. The shutter speed is to stop a scene. The faster you go, the shorter the time span is that you get the light coming into your lens, the more you're freezing time. So the higher your shutter speed, the more you're freezing time. Now again, this picture, let's punch in on the back of the car here. You can see that it's not fully straight, it's a little bit blurry. So what the problem is that the shutter speed was not high enough to fully freeze the car, but the picture is getting quite dark because it was raining, as you can see, quite heavily, and there's just very little light to work with. So what you have to do is you have to open up your aperture to a low f number, and you have to crank up your ISO in order to compensate for these kind of conditions to be able to take these pictures. So let's take a picture that was taken within 15 minutes of this one, and let's see what the difference is, shall we? And here we have the next image. And as you can see, this one is much crisper. Now, I did have to crank up my ISO because it was very dark outside, so the end result is going to be a little bit more grainy than I wanted it to be if you fully zoom in. But these were never meant to be pictures as good looking pictures. They were just testing out the camera and playing with the different settings and setting up for this video, and there was just a nice big puddle that I could easily take a picture of. So it was right there. But this is a really good example. So if we zoom in on the tire, you can actually see it's just stopped. There's almost no blur. It just stops. If we look at the back of the car again, it's just completely motionless. And this car was going by at around 30, 40, 50 kilometers an hour. Don't know exactly how fast, but something like that. So at a decent speed. So stopping it, you actually need to go pretty high on your shutter. But in doing so, you're letting much less light in because it only opens up for 1x amount of a second. So if your shutter speed is 60, it opens for 1/60th of a second. If your shutter speed is 600, it's 1/600th of a second. So you divide 1 second by 600, and that's the time it actually stays open for. So you can imagine the shorter it stays open, the less light will come in. So you need to compensate that. There's two ways to compensate that. You can crank up your ISO, or you can open up your aperture to the lowest f value, meaning you let in the most amount of light. So those are your two main mechanics of getting a clearer picture when doing this. So let's just briefly throw this one in. This is when you set your shutter speed too high without compensating in other areas to let in more light, and you're just going to get a very dark picture. So just wanted to get it out. This is what happens. So if your pictures are too dark, there can be three things wrong. Your ISO is too low, your aperture is too closed off, so a high aperture number, or your shutter speed is too high for the current light level that you're shooting in. So what are the use cases for shutter speed? The two main ones are to diminish the amount of light hitting your sensor, as well as freezing time or stopping time or slowing time down by only capturing a fraction of a second in order to appear at least to slow down time or stop time. Now the opposite is true as well. If you want to let in more light, you let your shutter speed be longer and longer, and even past 1 second, and that will create things like star trails and things like high exposure shots or overexposure, which can lead to very creative things as well. So it weighs on both sides of the scale. You can either slow down time and get less light in, or you can not speed up time, but capture more time is the better way of phrasing it, and show more detail. So at night you could actually make it look like it's almost day. If you keep it up for 30 seconds, keep your shutter open for 30 seconds, have a reasonably high ISO, and have your aperture wide open. So those are the things you can do with shutter speed in combination with other things, obviously, but hopefully this was informative to you. If it was, leave a comment down below and show us what you did with this kind of information. Did it, what kind of shots did you make with it? So let us know in the comments down below if there's anything else you would like to see or hear from us. This was Zero. Good luck.